Welcome back to the deep dive. You know the drill. We take your sources, notes, articles, all that raw info, and we really dig in to pull out the key insights for you.
Yeah, give you that shortcut to being genuinely informed, maybe find a few surprises along the way.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into the world of the American Pit Bull Terrier. We're talking game dogs, the art, maybe the science of breeding.
And we're doing it through the eyes of a real legend, a Texas breeder named Gary Hammonds. His perspective is, well, pretty unique.
It really is. What's fascinating here is that our material, it's coming straight from him, basically. Someone absolutely renowned for his contribution to the breed.
Right. So you're not just getting, like, dates and facts. You're getting the why, the thinking behind it all from someone who lived and breathed this stuff for decades.
Decades, yeah. Now, the sources do mention Gary Hammond's background, involved in the historical pit dog world. But they also make it clear he stepped away from fighting when the felony laws came in, living the good life now, as they say.
And it's important for you listening to know, our focus here is purely historical, analytical. We're looking at his breeding insights, his methods, not endorsing past activities.
Absolutely. His knowledge as a master breeder, his scientific approach almost, it's incredibly rich for anyone wanting to understand the APBT on a deeper level.
Yeah, definitely. This deep dive, it's going to give you a real look at the history of breeding these high-performance animals, why bloodlines matter so much.
And the kind of nuanced understanding you need.
Exactly. The subtleties involved in developing top animals. And it's all straight from Gary Hammonds. The goal is, get you up to speed quickly but thoroughly. Understand the sheer dedication involved.
Right, the dedication. It's not just a casual thing. It's art and science combined.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Section 1. Gary Hammond's foundation, his journey, his philosophy. Because his connection to these dogs, it started really young.
Yeah, it's quite a story. It really grounds everything else. It wasn't just a job for him.
Not at all. Picture this. Gary Hammond's just 3 years old. He's in a bar ditch, like a roadside drainage ditch.
Right.
And it's flooding. Seriously dangerous situation for a little kid. Could have easily drowned.
Oh, wow.
But he didn't. Because of a bulldog named TIPP, this dog, TIPP, literally dragged him out of the flooding ditch, saved his life.
That's incredible. Just wow. That kind of experience at that age.
It sticks with you, right? And it tells you immediately how deep this connection runs for him.
And TKPP himself is interesting. The source notes he wasn't like a top-line purebred APBT.
No, not exactly. He was 3/4 pit, 1/4 farm dog, mixed lineage.
But Gary described him as thinking he was 100% bulldog, licked it, acted it, would jump on anything, apparently.
That tenacity, that spirit, even in a mixed breed dog, that first encounter with such courage, such loyalty, it just sealed the deal for Gary.
It sparked, as Gary called it, a lifelong love affair with pit bulls. Forged an unbreakable link right there.
Amazing. So that dramatic start, that life-saving moment, it really sets the stage for his whole life's work, his passion. It wasn't just a choice. It felt almost fated.
Yeah, it gives you that context for his unwavering commitment. So from that really personal beginning, let's look at his professional approach. Because the core of his success, it's all about pedigrees.
Right, the meticulous use of pedigrees. He saw them as, what, unavoidable?
Unavoidable, yeah. And a very important aspect of breeding any type of animal, but especially crucial for high-performance animals, like APBTs. For him, it was fundamental.
So it's way beyond just how a dog looks or even performs once. It's about that deep dive into the lineage, understanding generations of potential.
Absolutely. It's a massive commitment. The source says it takes a lot of time, money, and patience, plus plenty of common sense. It's not for the faint of heart.
And Gary Hammonds is one of the few who really pull it off consistently.
Yeah, described as one of the very few that can look back at a very successful career breeding a high percentage of good dogs. It wasn't luck. It was decades of applying these principles rigorously.
Yeah.
Made him stand out.
And that impact, you can see it in the famous dogs he bred. These aren't just names, they're legends in the breed.
Definitely. We're talking Fritz Jansen's champion Spike, huge in Europe, one of the best producing dogs over there.
Wow, Europe too.
Yeah. And then Ronnie Anderson's champion Spade, champion Smiley, champion Goose. These dogs set benchmarks.
But the big one, the one that really put him on the global map, was Rufus, right?
Rufus, absolutely. He turned out to be one of the best producing male dogs in the world. And producing here means he consistently passed on those top-tier traits.
So his influence wasn't just local, it was truly global through those genetics.
Precisely. Rufus's legacy is immense. It
Yeah.
really shows the power of meticulous breeding.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. Gary's known as a very scientific breeder. It's not just gut feeling, it's systematic.
Right? Methodical. Based on data, observation, genetic principles.
And he's most famous for his alligator line. That's the name that always comes up with Gary Hammond.
The alligator line, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just history. That line, which Gary developed so carefully, it still plays an important role in the breeding program of many serious breeders around the world, even today.
Still influential now. That's incredible staying power.
It really is. It shows his work wasn't just temporary, it was foundational. His understanding created something lasting, something others could build on.
Which brings us nicely to section 2. Really digging into those bloodlines, especially that alligator legacy. So for a breeder like Gary who's so careful, what makes him choose one bloodline over another? Why alligator?
Well, it was a very strategic choice he made, maybe 10 or 15 years before the interview. He wasn't short on options, you know.
Like what other lines were around them?
Oh, yeah, the Bruno Heinze lines, known for that incredible drive. The Bullison lines, sheer power, very formidable dogs. And the Corvino dogs, often agile, smart, lots of quality choices.
So plenty of good options. What did he see in alligator that the others didn't quite have for him?
He looked at specific dogs, Soko, Renee, and the original alligator, and saw this critical combination. First, he said they were smart dogs, hugely important, tradable, adaptable.
Intelligence is key, yeah.
Then they were hard to hurt, meaning really robust, physically tough, resilient, could handle pressure.
Okay, smart and tough.
And the clincher. They were real game dogs. Now, gameness, that's that unwavering spirit, the stamina, the absolute refusal to quit no matter what. That specific blend, intelligence, durability, and that deep gameness, that's what made the alligator line his focus.
That specific combination. Got it. But here's a twist, right? Something Gary was really open about regarding the parents of these great alligator dogs. It kind of flips assumptions.
It really does.
Yeah.
This speaks volumes about genetics. Gary stated, quite frankly, that the parents, Nigger and Satin Lady, well, individually, he didn't like either of them as individuals.
He didn't like the parents, but they produced these amazing dogs.
Exactly. That's the paradox. He said, but together they certainly produce some good dogs. It shows that sometimes the magic isn't in the individual parts, but in how they combine, the genetic synergy.
So the sum is greater than the parts, literally. Two okay dogs, maybe, produce something exceptional together.
It happens. It's about how those genes interact. It's not always about breeding best to best individually. It's about finding the right match.
That's a huge insight. So a dog that seems flawed might actually carry hidden genetic keys. It's about compatibility, not just individual perfection.
Absolutely. A top breeder sees that potential, that deeper blueprint. And Gary Curley believed in it. The source says he had, what, about 110 dogs at the time?
110.
And most are bred from this bloodline. That's a massive long-term commitment showing his deep faith in that lineage, despite the unimpressive start on paper with the parents.
Speaking of those parents, let's talk about Nigger. There was that persistent, controversial rumor about him being a cur. That's a serious claim in game dog circles, right? It means lacking spirit.
A very serious claim, yeah. And Gary addressed it. He admitted he didn't know for sure if it was true, but he said, too many people tell the same story, that it had to be true.
So based on the sheer weight of the oral history in the community...
Seems like it. It shows how powerful reputation and shared stories are in these circles, especially back then.
And he placed Nigger historically as one of the last of the Tudor stuff, Tudor being a really foundational line.
Hugely foundational. Known for gameness, structure. So Nigger came from significant stock, historically speaking.
And genetically.
Gary mentioned he was heavy Jeff and baby breeding. Again, respected lines with their own contributions. But the key point Gary made was, when breeding that specific Tudor end of the line, options were thin.
Limited choices for studs.
Right. And in that context, despite the rumors or individual flaws, Nigger was apparently the best producer of them all. It explains the strategic need to use him. Sometimes you work with the best available genetics for your goal, even if it's not perfect on the surface.
It really highlights the tough, pragmatic choices breeders face, balancing rumors, individual traits, and the need to preserve valuable genetic lines.
It's complex. It's not always black and white. It shows that deep, practical grasp of genetics in action.
Okay, let's move into section 3. This is a big one. The art and science of breeding, specifically inbreeding, catalysts, and stud dogs. Starting with inbreeding, it's controversial, delicate. What was Gary's take?
His take was very clear, maybe surprisingly blunt for some. He said, I sure like inbreeding.
Likes it. Wow, so he saw it as a useful tool.
Definitely a tool, but a powerful one with major risks, he warned. If you take it a generation or two far, you will lose what you are inbreeding for.
Lose the very traits you're trying to lock in.
Exactly. Those specific types, those characteristics you want can be lost due to too heavy inbreeding. It concentrates genes, good and bad. So you get consistency, but push it too far, and you risk losing vigor, introducing problems, or just diluting the good stuff. It's a real balancing act.
A double-edged sword, for sure. So how did he manage that risk? What was his method for doing it responsibly?
His method was all about constant, rigorous evaluation. He said, with every generation, you take a hard look at what you've got. It's not passive breeding. It's active assessment at every stage.
Looking closely at each litter, each dog.
Deciding if individuals are good enough to breed back to the previous generation.
No.
Classic inbreeding like father-daughter, mother-son pairings.
Okay.
But here's the rule. If you can't justify it, then you don't need to carry it on any further. No excuses. If the quality isn't there or warning signs appear, you stop that line of closed breeding.
Disciplined. And what if things started looking too tight? What were the solutions?
That's where the idea of outcrossing comes in. He mentioned the ability to cut cross in that generation or even introduce a catalyst blood to that family of dogs to keep it vigorous.
Catalyst blood, like an outcross to bring in fresh genetics.
Exactly. Sometimes, he said, that's the only thing you can do to prevent the negative effects of too much inbreeding and maintain the line's health and strength.
Okay, this catalyst blood idea is really interesting. A strategic way to bring in diversity without totally losing the core line. Did he give examples of catalysts he used?
He did. Historically, he mentioned using Bullison and Bruno Heinzel as the catalyst, and with good results. We talked about those lines, Bullison for power, Bruno Heinzel for drive. They brought in specific strengths.
So complementary lines to refresh his core alligator stuff.
Right. And currently, or at the time of the source, he was looking at others. He mentioned a little stud dog that is out of the Nigerino type stuff, specifically Jolie Blonde bred to Mitzi.
Okay.
And also the Ralph's dog I have, who was down from Pedro. And Pedro came from that rascal type breeding, and he was owned by Garner, another big name, Garner.
So constantly evaluating, constantly looking for the right genetic infusion to keep the line strong.
He believed either of these can be good catalyst blood. It shows that ongoing strategic management.
Now, let's talk stud dogs. What makes an ideal stud in Gary's view? He made a really important distinction, didn't he, between performance and genetic contribution.
A crucial distinction. For Gary, the #1 quality in a stud dog is an ability to reproduce. That's paramount. Can he reliably pass on the good stuff?
So, more important than, say, his own fight record or weight pull record.
In terms of being a stud, yes, performance helps evaluate, obviously, but the ability to transmit traits is key. And he stressed that for any role, pit, catch dog, weight pull, the essential qualities he breeds for are gameness and intelligence. Those are his non-negotiables.
He did mention an example, though, Gary and Christy F. in Saigon, a weight pull dog from his lines.
Yeah, a tremendous weight pull dog, he called him, from a good family of dogs, straight out of my stuff, shows the versatility in his genetics.
But he added a caveat, right?
He did. He noted, you don't see many of my dogs that are good weight pull dogs. Which isn't a knock on Saigon. It just suggests his primary focus remained on those traditional qualities of gameness and intelligence, even if some dogs excelled elsewhere. His core breeding purpose was clear.
That leads to maybe the biggest aha moment here, prioritizing the genetic pool over individual champions. Gary had strong thoughts on the difference between a fighting dog and a stud dog.
Absolutely. He said what you need in a stud, whether he is a fighting dog or not, is a dog that can reproduce. The title alone doesn't cut it.
So what does make a good stud, genetically speaking?
He listed the crucial components. Sound genetic structure, both between the ears and in the heart, and also the body has to be sound.
Breaking that down, between the ears is intelligence, temperament.
Right. Mental soundness in the heart is that gameness, the spirit. And body has to be sound. Means good physical conformation, health, no major genetic defects. You need the whole package for reliable breeding.
And he warned against chasing titles.
Big time. He said, too many times people lose track of this, and they breed to champion so-and-so or grand champion, etc. But because of their title, it doesn't mean they will be able to produce that type of dog. A huge pitfall.
So a champion might just be a fluke, genetically speaking. Might not pass it on.
Could be. Gary's ideal wasn't just one or two great dogs. He looked for a relatively tight genetic pool and a family rather than two or three good individuals. Consistency across the whole line. Predictable transmission of traits. That's the goal for a series breeder focused on legacy.
That makes so much sense. Breeding for the family, not just the star. Okay, section 4. Evolving traits and traditions. The landscape changes, right? Gary noted the rise of weight pulling.
Yeah, he saw a lot of growing interest in breeding dogs for weight pulls and etc. A definite trend.
But he saw a key difference in motivation.
A fundamental one. He said, most of these people are not interested in gameness and other traditional qualities, and then just flatly no they aren't. It's a different set of goals.
Though he did add, but of course there are a lot that are just pulling dogs. So acknowledging some nuance there. What are the physical results of this split focus?
You see physical divergence. He described typical pull dogs as straight stifled UKC-type dogs. Straight stifles mean less angulation in the hind legs, impacting agility and certain types of power compared to traditional game dogs. UKC standards often emphasize different traits, too.
And he felt these dogs wouldn't fare well against the traditional type.
Yeah, he said they would have a hard time with the more fighting-type dog, whether it be a good fighting dog or not. The structure suits a different function.
But then, intriguingly, he saw a counter-trend at the APBA Nationals.
Right. He observed more and more of the pull dogs that look like the old fighting dogs with the roached back and long legs. Roached back is that curve over the loin. Long legs with longer legs.
Suggesting maybe some convergence, or that the old structures actually work well for pulling too?
Could be either, or both. Function dictates form, maybe. Perhaps breeders found that the resilience and leverage from some traditional builds, even those less common now, are actually advantageous for pulling immense weight. It raises questions about how breeds adapt to new tasks.
So what does this all mean? For Gary, amidst these shifting sands, his focus remains steady, right?
Rock solid. He kept coming back to gameness and intelligence. Those were his priorities, regardless of what became popular elsewhere. It shows real conviction in his vision for the breed, not chasing trends, but sticking to what he believed defined the APBT's core essence.
Okay, section 5. Unraveling the pedigree puzzle. This gets murky, especially with historical figures. How did Gary handle pedigree accuracy?
It was crucial, but with a big grain of salt. He used pedigrees a great deal, but added, it's not just what you see on paper. The paper was just the start.
So how did he verify? If the paper could be dodgy?
His method was direct observation, first-hand knowledge. He preferred to have seen their grandparents firsthand, as well as the parents and other similar bred individuals.
Wow, seeing multiple generations himself.
Yeah, and he explicitly said he'd use those dogs instead of the dogs from another part of the country that I was not sure about the pedigree. Experience trumped paper, this really uncertain paper from afar. Seeing was believing for him.
Which brings us to the big one. Maurice Carver, legendary, influential, and controversial regarding pedigrees.
Absolutely central. Gary noted, practically all of your dogs go back to Maurice Carver stuff. But then you have the persistent rumors. A lot of rumors about him mixing up pedigrees when he was still alive, deliberately confusing things.
So how did Gary reconcile that, believing his own Carver-based lines were accurate despite the general suspicion?
His reasoning was fascinating, almost counterintuitive. He pointed to the breeding of Satin Lady, a key bitch in his line. He said her pedigree was too screwed up of a breeding, as far as on paper, not to be the truth.
Wait, because it looked bad on paper, it was more likely to be true.
That was his logic. If someone was faking it, they'd make it look clean, logical. Satin Lady's background, a scatterbred bitch out of Ironhead and Black Beauty, a big black bitch, looks so random, so unconventional, that it seems more authentic to Gary than a neat fabrication would have.
That's brilliant in a way, and he actually asked Carver about it.
He did. He asked Maurice, why did you make a breeding like that? Carver's reply was classic, apparently. Well, son, I tell you, I thought it'd be good. Just like that. Simple, pragmatic, maybe a bit mysterious.
Shows Carver's confidence, his intuition maybe, and Gary built a whole theory around this, right, about why Carver might have messed with pedigrees.
Yeah, Gary believed Maurice had a way of mixing blood on papers and pedigrees and whatever it took to make it work. But the motive wasn't just random deception.
What was it then?
Gary theorized, I think that part of the reason for Maurice putting out bogus pedigrees was to keep the secret to himself. To protect his winning formulas, his competitive edge. Don't let others easily copy his success.
Like trade secrets, wow. And Gary felt confident about his own line's accuracy.
He said, I sincerely believe that the pedigrees of the dogs that I use to be right, followed by pragmatism. If they're not, it's too late to worry about it anyway because I'm 3 or 4 generations away. His results spoke for themselves at that point.
Makes sense. You work with what you have, what proves itself. And he really rated Carver's impact, didn't he?
Hugely. He stated flat out, in the 70s, Maurice Carver was the best breeder in the country. He bred more dogs in those years, first-class dogs, than any other 5 top breeders in the country.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal output and quality.
He puts it in perspective. And that final analogy about Carver.
Perfect, wasn't it? He would sell you the cake, but keep the recipe. That sums up Gary's theory brilliantly, protecting the magic formula.
Okay, Section 6, Regional Impact and Legacy. Focusing on Texas, but also touching on other lines like Howard Heinzel's. What was Gary's view on the Heinzel dogs?
He had respect, but also some critique. He said, they were certainly good dogs, but, and I hate to say this, they lost a lot of what they were famous for in the 60s and 70s. A decline over time.
Was it Heinzel's fault?
Not exactly Heinzel's initial skill. Gary said, it is no fault of Howard, because he bred with some real good genetic background and put it together the way it was supposed to be. The foundation was good.
So what went wrong, in Gary's view?
He believed Heinzel bred those dogs just too tight and they played out. Back to the dangers of excessive inbreeding. Too much genetic concentration, loss of vigor.
But they needed an outcross, a catalyst.
That was Gary's feeling. It would click if you would cross it, but Heinzel kept it pure. That commitment to purity, while maybe noble, ultimately weakened the line by limiting genetic diversity.
A cautionary tale. But Gary did use some of Heinzel's earlier stuff.
Oh, yeah. He admired the earlier work, specifically mentioning the stuff Heinzel used before. And what I liked so much was line bred, 50-50 Colby-Debo. That specific blend, Colby and Debo genetics balanced, was hard to beat, according to Gary.
And he had a dog from that blend himself.
His Taffy bitch was one of those combinations. He called her a hell of a dog and saw others bred similarly that were top quality. Her specific breeding was a double musty bred dog off Bat and Twiggy. Shows he recognized and utilized successful formulas from others when they worked.
Okay, finally, let's talk Texas. Why did Texas become such a hotbed for top APBTs and breeders, according to Gary?
He saw it as building a tremendous base. Through sheer concentration, you had top dogmen from Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana, and to a lesser degree in Mexico, all breeding, competing, interacting.
Creating a sort of ecosystem.
Exactly, and fueled by intense competition. He said, the competition will last 40 or 50 years right here in Texas between top dogmen. It's only logical that you come up with some top-notch bulldogs and dogmen. Competition drives excellence.
And they weren't just breeding amongst themselves, they brought stuff in.
Crucial point. He noted several breeders from here went out to buy dogs from Corvino, Heinzel, Tudor, Kennard, and Boudreaux. All the big names from elsewhere.
So importing top genetics to add to the local mix.
Right. All these very good bloodlines were put together, so it's just the situation that arose. A perfect storm.
Yeah.
Regional passion, fierce competition, and strategic acquisition of the best outside genetics.
Makes sense. Excellence rarely happens in a vacuum. But he didn't think Texas would dominate forever without effort.
No, he was realistic. He said something like, while Texas dogs are top now, I'm sure at some time in history there will be another spot in the world the dogs will be just as good. But they really have to do their work to get there. Success requires ongoing effort, dedication. You don't rest on your laurels.
So what does this all mean? Pulling it all together after this deep dive into Gary Hammond's world, it means understanding something complex like APBT history, like breeding, requires hearing from the masters. Their personal stories, their science, their hard-won insights.
Yeah, his perspective weaves together personal history, that scientific approach, the complex tapestry of bloodlines. It's a really complete picture of dedication.
It really is. This raises an important question for you, listening at home. How do these principles, Gary talked about careful selection, balancing inbreeding with catalysts, focusing on core traits like gameness and intelligence, how do they apply beyond dogs?
Think about how his approach, treating breeding like art and science, reflects mastery in any field. That meticulous observation, strategic thinking, building a legacy over time. How does that relate to cultivating excellence anywhere? Whether it's animals, business, art. It's about understanding your subject deeply and making deliberate choices.
A really powerful thought to chew on. Well, that's about all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through Gary Hammond's insights and the history of the American Pit Bull Terrier.
It's been fascinating.
Absolutely. And hey, for all you enthusiasts out there, lovers of APBT history, game dog history, seriously, check out the APBT INFO YouTube channel. Hundreds of hours of videos on the history of the breed. a massive archive for your own deep dives.
Yeah, definitely worth exploring if this sparked your interest.
So keep digging, keep asking questions, stay curious. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.